I had a friend when I was in grade 9 who claimed to run 10 kilometres a day and who told me that she would eat half a wheat bix for breakfast, and she would bring to school tiny, sad little pots of blueberries and cut up, what's it called? Celery. Cut up celery, and she would have the smallest little salads with a tiny bit of cheese and a tiny bit of like chopped up carrot. And at the time I was insanely triggered by this girl, because every day I went to school it was like she would eat a mouse's amount of what we were supposed to actually be eating, and while I would be sitting with my sandwich and my yogurt and trying to get down all this food that I knew because it was on my meal plan and because that's what I had to do. And I was supposed to be the one with anorexia. I was supposed to be the one who struggled with eating and who didn't eat enough. And I was sitting with my, decent lunches while she would nibble on tiny little healthy snacks and talk about the amount of activity she did and how her mum got angry at her when she was lazy. When I went to Japan later that year, I came home and heard from my mum that this girl's mum had found under her bed 4 bin bags worth of chip packets and cookie packets and lolly bags and chocolate wrappers, and she had filled these bin bags with massive amounts of junk food that I still assume my friend had been eating at times when she didn't think anyone would ever know, and no one did know until her mum, found all this stuff. And I'm telling you this story because we live in a world in which people claim and put forward that they're eating a lot less than what they actually are, and that's the result of a society and a media that is telling us we need to be less, we need to be smaller, we need to restrict our calories, we need to be healthier, we need to be obsessed about our diets, or we're not worth anything as people. And so people will claim that they are adhering to these rules and that and that what they're doing is right, and that they're living by the standards set for us by a crazy world. But it's just not true, because the truth will come out, and I know this is tricky to talk about, but because I understand that weight does not always define whether you're healthy or not, but this girl did not appear to be a girl who was eating only carrot sticks and half a wheat bix a day. And she's beautiful, and she still is beautiful, and unfortunately I don't talk to her anymore, but she had a beautiful body shape. She looked gorgeous and she looked healthy, and I knew that if she was truly eating what she claimed she was eating, what she portrayed herself as eating, that she wouldn't have looked healthy. I know that she would have been severely malnourished, undernourished, and starving her body, and it would have looked normal. And that can still be true. That's still the case for a lot of people with eating disorders who have weight restored. But I was able to actually see the logic in my own brain, and when I would cry about this and talk to someone about it, they would tell me, she must be eating enough food to sustain the healthy weight that she's at, or she would be dead. And so, to get into today's video, which is going to be about how we are so triggered by the amount of people that claim not to eat anything, and how to get over that. So, because it's insanely difficult, especially when you're trying to recover and you've got all this food that you have to eat, and you're being compared to someone who at 12 o'clock in the afternoon says, "Oh God, haven't eaten since last night," and you're like, what? Like, I'm getting ready for lunch and I've already had a decent breakfast and a decent snack. You've probably eaten upwards of 500, 1,000 more calories than they have today already. And then you get triggered and you start thinking, I'm supposed to be the one with anorexia, I'm supposed to be the one with an eating disorder, I'm supposed to fear food and not be eating anything. Why is this person allowed to get away with not eating anything and I have to be here following this stupid meal plan? And I know and I understand how difficult that can be. So, I struggled with this for a really, really long time, and I don't anymore. I actually don't at all, and that's something that I'm really proud of and something that I can say truthfully. I don't get triggered by people telling me that they haven't eaten. A big part of that is actually the transition to veganism that I've made, but I don't want to talk about that today because I think that's a whole other topic. So I want to talk about it from the perspective of using your logical brain to counter-argue with these claims that people make. Basically, what you have to remember is that if the person that you're thinking of right now who always claims to have not eaten anything and who always seems to just have carrot sticks and a little bowl of lettuce at lunch and maybe like a tiny little Freddo frog on the side, if anyone does not eat enough calories to supply their body with the energy it needs for growth, repair, for movement, for storage, for the organs that are working in you, for your heart to beat, for all that kind of stuff, they would be dead. And yes, it might take a long time, and we see that with people with anorexia. It does take a long time for someone to die from complications due to anorexia nervosa, but it does happen, and it's very obvious that they're undernourished and that they are not eating enough for their body. So I think that's the first thing to remember. And when I could finally understand that, it was like, oh my god, this light just went off in my head. Because, yeah, people, if they weren't eating enough, they would be dead. They would be undernourished, they would be starved, it would be very obvious. There does come a point where the body can't sustain a healthy weight if you're not having enough calories to survive. So basically it is remembering how people get to the stage of actually eating enough when all you seem to see them do is eat like a cherry a day, or like talk about how they don't eat anything. People, especially teenagers, tend to skip breakfast and then have like a snack bar or like a little packet of crisps or pretzels or something like that. Then they might have a piece of fruit, and that's it. That's what you see during the day. Sometimes days will be like so different. Like sometimes they'll go to like the school canteen and get like a big, a good decent meal, like a pie or something like that. Sometimes they will bring their own lunch. Sometimes you'll see that they do snack on other things throughout the day, but most of all, most usually, we as teenagers see a lot of other teenagers really not eating very much at all, because we see them during the time of day where we're at school, and it's this time where people tend to restrict their calories the most, whether that's meaningfully or not. And what you have to remember is that we don't see those people, our friends, for hours and hours. There are hours and hours that we spend at home on our own where no one actually sees us, and that's the same for us and seeing them. So I have a sister who is 15, and I know that although she doesn't eat a lot of calories during the day, the amount of food that she would have from, say, takeaway fish and chips on a Friday night will make up, the significant portion of calories that she's missed during her day. So a lot of teenagers, although they seem to be starving themselves during the school day, will go home and make up the 2,000 plus calories with one meal at night, because they're finally listening to their bodies, or because they're listening to their brain, and their brain wants food and their brain wants flavour, and they are listening to what their body actually is asking for, whether that's through hunger signals or not. Because a lot of people don't get hungry. When you starve yourself, your stomach does shrink and you don't get hungry, and your body ends up convincing your brain it's not hungry, because if your brain was too hungry, it wouldn't be able to do anything. So that's like a survival mechanism to not get super, super hungry. You get to a point where you're surpassed hunger. You know what I mean? You get to a point where you're surpassed exhaustion and you can't sleep. You do get to a point when you've surpassed hunger and you don't feel hungry. But kids and teenagers will go home and have calorie-dense meals that make up the calories that we have missed them seeing, and that is fact. I absolutely promise you. And even if it's not in a meal, they make it up in snacks. They will, live. My sister will come home and immediately will snack on something, and then might come down like 45 minutes later and have something else, or she'll have like a fruit bun or whatever, and that's fine. Like, that's absolutely fine. I'm not against people eating anything at all, but I'm just trying to get the message across that people, especially teenagers, will go home and will eat to make up for the calories that they've restricted during the day, because if they didn't, they wouldn't have enough energy in them to do what they do. The other thing that tends to happen, and that we now have a lot of proof of happening, is that people who starve themselves will inevitably binge. So if you restrict your calories enough, your body and brain will get to a point where they have to force you to eat meals and to eat high-calorie foods that will replace the energy that they're missing. And often that is done through binges. Like, we know now through a lot of research and through the exposure of the dieting industry, and how pretty much all weight and more is gained back after diets, we know that people binge when their bodies and brains are too starved. That's just inevitable, because we require energy to live. That is also survival. And the body will go into a state of desperation when it's deprived of when it's too much deprived of calories. So, like most teenagers, we'll go home and like scoff down whatever's in the house. That might not be classified as a binge, but there will come a point for some people where they restrict their calories, usually meaningfully, to such a point that they will literally be out of control, and their brain will switch off, the logic of their brain will switch off, and their body will completely take over, because it needs the energy and the fuel to keep living. And obviously people aren't going to admit anything about these binges to us, because that is going against the rules of society, that's going against the rules of the media and what they're telling us to do. And people like to follow rules, and people like to tell other people that they've followed rules the right way, even when that's just not the case. So you do have to remember that binging, uncontrollable eating, and it does happen, upwards of 10,000 calories I've heard of and read about many times, will happen when people have starved themselves enough, and that's an inevitable result. And so in a way, I suppose you can even think of people restricting at school as being just the lead up to the huge calorie deficit that is going to be fixed by the body very soon. And you don't have to tell them that you know that, but if you know that in your own mind, like, that will be enough, that should be enough for your logic to kick in and to realize that the food is going to be made up at some point in time. It's also really important to understand that you eating regular meals and healthy meals, because, people with a history of eating disorder do tend to focus more on health just generally, that's just a fact. And people who eat regularly and who eat good things for their body and nourish themselves well will have a much, much better health in the long term than someone who doesn't eat, for 22 hours of the day, but who scoffs down 3,000 calories of hot chips in a couple of hours. And that's fine, like, as long as they're getting the calories in, that's what I'm talking about. But we, as people who eat regularly, as people who eat breakfast, especially breakfast is extremely important, we will have much better health in the long run. And we might not see that right now, but down the track, when our friends are 50 and cannot lose the weight, or people are developing, heart disease and diabetes, and everyone's saying, it's because you've eaten too much. It's actually because people have restricted themselves from food for so long through those teenage years and tried to make it all up in, an extremely fast way to get that energy into their bodies. They will be much, much unhealthier than someone who, like me, eats regularly, who eats lots of food. I eat lots and lots of volume. I don't have my Instagram anymore, but huge, like big bowls of whole, often like whole foods, often limited processing of foods. Although I eat plenty of processed foods, but I eat healthy foods. I eat foods that will nourish my soul and my body, and so I know that in the long run I'm going to have a much healthier body for that, and a much healthier mind. Like, I have a much healthier relationship with food and with eating than someone who is used to restricting themselves throughout the day and binging out at night time. And it's also really important for your metabolism. Like, my metabolism is awesome. And that's just a fact. Like, that's, as you can tell, like, I'm really not stuck in my eating disorder much anymore. But I can see how me saying, oh, I have a really good metabolism, could be like thought of as being stuck in my eating disorder, but it's not. That's just a fact. Like, I have really good digestion. I like, food moves through me really well, and my diet is like really reflective of that, and my happiness is really reflective of that. Like, I have energy and I have health and I'm prosperous and I thrive in the things that I do, and that's all due to me eating regularly and having my metabolism sped up, and it keeps going. And people who do restrict a lot and then eat especially like breakfast, and then eat later on a lot of food, are really setting their metabolism up to fail, because when the body has gone without food overnight, that's already, upwards of 12 hours without anything to eat. And when it gets to the morning time and the body is hungry, even though it might not send you hunger signals, but it is hungry. And if someone ignores that and someone goes through until, post lunchtime without having eaten anything, the body will be in a literal state of fasting. Breakfast is for breaking the fast overnight. It is break fast, because you have fasted overnight and it's time to break that fast so that your body doesn't continue in a state of fasting and starvation. And what happens when your body is in starvation mode is that fat is stored way more efficiently. Your metabolism is slowed down so that calories aren't burnt well, because they're being conserved for the famine that is thought to be coming by the body. And this is why people, in middle age, and middle-aged women especially, find it so hard to shift the weight. And it's nothing to do with willpower, which, the media has us believe. It's to do with the fact that they've set their body up over so many years to absolutely fail them. Like, you cannot expect that going without eating for so long, or having only tiny little highly processed, highly sugar refined snacks, or even like low calorie snacks, either one is just as bad as each other, will be enough to keep them at optimum health for their life. Like, so many people are so unwell these days, and we're being led to believe that it's a cause of an unhealthy diet, which it is, but we're being told that it's an unhealthy diet in terms of the fact that people are eating too much. Yes, they are eating too much, but too much of the wrong foods that are providing them with the energy that they actually need to live. Like, the whole thing is just a cycle, and we really need to understand that by eating regularly and by nourishing ourselves properly, we are at a much better advantage than someone who is doing the typical teenage thing and restricting at school, meaningfully or not meaningfully, and going for it when they get home. Probably another thing that's really difficult to deal with is the fact that people tend to tell us, as people who have suffered from eating disorders, how little they've eaten, not other people. And I actually don't know why this is. Like, I can't really say this is because blah 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 blah, because I'm actually not sure. Like, I don't have a good idea of why people tend to turn to people with eating disorders to admit that they haven't eaten for the last 15 hours. Because it really doesn't help us. But I think it's important to talk about, because I no longer struggle with people telling me that kind of thing, because I understand that they must be eating enough to survive and to maintain a healthy weight. But when people say this kind of stuff to you, you do have to work through your logical brain first, through all the stuff that I've talked about already. And then you have to remember that they're not actually saying things to fuel your eating disorder. That's not the purpose of why they're telling you something. Most likely they're telling you this because they feel unwell, or they feel like they do need to tell someone. They might feel guilty. They probably know that they're doing the wrong thing for their body, and they're going to turn to someone who can sympathize with them, because we have also done bad things to our bodies, and it's much easier to talk to someone about a problem that you know they will sympathize with you about. I just think you have to remember, in any cases with any triggers, that people aren't actually appealing to you to spite your eating disorder, or to bring that up, or to encourage it. They're telling you, it's kind of a reflection of how unstable and vulnerable they are as a person. It's nothing to do with you. It's not a sign for you to start restricting your food, and for you to start getting into the habit of not eating enough, and trying to make your body maintain a weight that's not healthy for it, and an energy deficit that's never going to work. Like, that's not why they're appealing to you, and that's it's like just completely a moot point. You don't need to focus on what they've told you, because you need to recognize that what you're doing for your body is right and healthy. You'll be better off in the long run, and what they're doing to their body will, although it might be working for them right now, it will drastically affect them later on. And you have to remember that you've been through a big struggle, and you've been cruel to your body, and it deserves care and love. It doesn't deserve to go back to a state of being deprived of nourishment. Also, remember that people drastically misremember what they've eaten. So my sister, for example, might scoff a piece of last night's pizza while she's packing her lunchbox with like low calorie but highly processed, refined, sugar laden, salt laden, trans fat laden little snack packs. She might eat like a slice of pizza or a slice of cake or something just while she's doing that at 7:30 in the morning. But she'll say, I haven't had breakfast. People don't obsessively remember what they've eaten like a lot of people with eating disorders do. There's not that focus on food that there is for us, and so they don't adequately actually remember what they've eaten a lot of the times when they are talking to you about when they last ate. Like, I know a lot of people who say if the opportunity presents itself and they're given a chocolate in class or something, they won't count that chocolate as having eaten anything, because that won't be in their memory as, a noticeable or notable meal. People will generally really drastically misremember what they've eaten, and they'll also lie. Whether that's, consciously or not, people lie about what they've eaten. People say they've had less than they have. And that's just, again, that's a result of a society that tells us we need to eat less food, and we need to restrict our calories, and we need to be thinner, and be in a calorie deficit, which can't be maintained. So just remember that often when people say, when they refer to what they've having eaten, it's actually, they're not being truthful at all, and that's not a spiteful thing. That's just a fact. It's just a fact of life. So the difference is that someone normal, someone with a normal relationship to food, someone who hasn't been through a restrictive eating disorder or like a binge eating disorder, they might not have breakfast, or they might have an apple at lunchtime, but they will, unseen, scoff a bag of hot chips, after school on the way to work, or a toasted sandwich they'll make before dinner. When I used to have up to like 8 pieces of toast after my dinner when I was kind of younger, and that was very normal for me. I used to, if I forgot to have lunch through the day, or if I forgot to pack my lunch, I would always make up for it, whether it was conscious or not making up for it, whether like that was responding to my mental hunger or my physical hunger. It was always made up for. Like, I always listened to my body, and that's what we tend to forget. Like, people listen to what they want to eat, and they don't always tell us about that stuff, because they want us to think that they're adhering to the rules of society. And fair enough, like everyone wants to be included, and everyone wants to feel like they're part of a group. Everyone wants to feel normal, and rules and guidelines supply the means by which we do that. And so people are obviously going to claim that they are adhering to the social norms and doing what has been told to us is right, when in fact there's lots of unseen food that we don't see that people are eating, I guarantee you, to maintain healthy weights. Just remember, at the end of the day, ignorance is bliss in this case, and a lot of it has to be ignored because a lot of it is illogical and untrue, and it's really important that you keep your energy up, that you nourish yourself and keep your energy stores full so that your brain can work and your body can work and you can be happy and thrive and healthy. And it's just really important that you keep fighting your eating disorder and that you don't let stupid comments from people who are just, in this case, just don't have the knowledge about what you've been through. You've just got to let those comments go because they're just not true. As I've talked about it, like, it just couldn't work to keep them at a healthy weight or a healthy stage in life. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are, and check out the blog. Keep watching. Thank you so much, and see you soon.